Good evening. A reading from Exodus chapter 17, 1 through 7. From the wilderness of Sin, the whole congregation of the Israelites journeyed by stages as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. The people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and people complained against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, "What shall I do for this people? They are almost ready to stone me." The Lord said to Moses, "Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of the Israel with you. Take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile and go. I will be standing there in front of you on the rock of Horeb. Strike the rock, and the water will come out of it, so that the people may drink." Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the place Massah and Meribah because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" The word of the Lord. I hope you enjoyed tonight's scripture little journey, and let it begin. Before I tell you where I am, let me start with a little bit of a story. 1986. I was a kid in Lubbock, Texas, and my mom and dad sent me, my sister, and along with that, a family friend went with us to a place in LaGrange, Texas. And the kids from Lubbock spent a week at Luther Hill, which is where we are today. I remember that week fondly, and in particular, I remember my camp counselor, who now works at Tree of Life as a youth director. Something to behold. But here's what's fun. This right here was our cabin. I think. I'm going to tell you a little secret. I can't exactly remember. It could have been that one over there, but I'm pretty certain it was this one right here. And if I'm wrong, well, I'm sorry. The great news is they all look about the same in size. So come on, let's take a look at cabin 9. I'm sure back then it had another number and another name, but nonetheless, this is one of the places that I remember being with Bogart Nomad. I believe, if I remember correctly, that there was a 2-story bunk right here, and I got a picture, so I'll show that here in a second. In fact, I'll just do that now. Now, it looks a little different than it did in 86, but I believe that was where I stayed, in that top bunk right over here. And then my very gifted camp counselor stayed in a bed somewhere in this vicinity over here, which is now been turned into a nice little sitting area. Like I said, they've remodeled these cabins a few years ago, so it doesn't quite look the same as it did when I was here. Although there are little remnants there. If you look there, you can see the kind of stain of the concrete there where something rusted and they couldn't quite get it to go away. But and I'm not going to lie, I do not remember there being a coffee maker in our cabin in 86. Nor do I remember there being a beautiful split-level air conditioning system in it. I think we had air conditioning, but I don't remember for sure. Like I said, it's been a few weeks. But it's still a cabin. It's still here at Luther Hill. Camp stuff still happens here. And that's pretty great. Now, we've sent many kids to camp since I've been the pastor of Tree of Life, and even before that. I just can't speak to that. But I suspect they have had the same kinds of experiences that I did. Or maybe they had the same general feelings, which is, I'm going to church camp. It's a special place where you spend the whole week. And it's church camp. And I'm not even that religious. I know that's what I thought. I'm going to be at church. What do you do at church camp all week? Do you just pray? Do you read the Bible from sun up and sun down? I mean, how does that work? You have to understand, the world I lived in as a kid, we went to church every Sunday, but that doesn't mean I had a full grasp of the whole theological construct of how we did these things. But I do remember feeling very special about spending a whole week at camp. It was all about God. Well, it turns out you don't spend the whole week here reading the Bible or praying or contemplating, deep theological subjects or even reading big complicated books about God or anything like that. Nope. It's a little simpler than that. In the morning, you're going to go to worship. Before every meal, you're going to pray. At some point during the day, you're going to have a Bible study. And at the end of that day, you're going to worship one more time. It's a lot. It was a lot then. It's a lot now. Trust me. Worship at church camp has gotten a lot shorter since I became a pastor. Back in the old days, an hour's worship was not out of the norm. Now it's a little shorter. I didn't come back to camp, though. I had a great experience when I was here. Bogart was a fantastic counselor. Like I said, I have very fond memories of that. Here's a picture of him. He had more hair then. However, in 1990, as I have shared on many occasions, I got a job working for the church camp. I was coming out of the Boy Scouts, which was a lot like coming out of the military and going into civilian life. I thought you had to be dressed in your Class A's every day and that you had to do everything by the book and SOP and this and that and everything in between. And I kid you not, a whole bunch of camp counselors that had been there for many years at the church camp came up to me and said, well, we need to talk. Church camp is not Boy Scout camp. You need to quit thinking that's how we operate. I just didn't know any better. But needless to say, I got on board, stopped wearing a Class A uniform to everything. And, I never really wore a uniform when I was in church camp, but you get my point. I checked out mentally on the whole rigid structure thing and followed the rhythm of church camp, which was a very different thing. It was a powerful experience. For 12 weeks, 2 weeks of staff training and 10 weeks of working at camp, I attended worship twice a day, 6 days a week. I worked hard every day. And what I remember the most about those days, the thing that has never left me, were the students, the campers. There was a pattern that was very predictable. Day one, Sunday night, when the campers would arrive, the struggle began. They would come in homesick. They would be miserable. They would be sad. They'd feel lonely, displaced. That first night was rough. Now, I personally was not in the cabins with the campers because I was still a little young at that point to do that. I was only about 16, 17 years old. But many of the campers, I was told, cried themselves to sleep. They just did not. The reality of their situation hit them very hard. Monday wasn't much better. They would come to breakfast groggy, miserable, sad. And they were uneasy about their surroundings, and they didn't really know any of the people in their cabin. And then Monday afternoon wasn't much better either. In fact, it got really bad then, because by then they were willing to negotiate, and they were complaining, and what they really wanted to do was just go home. And if you just call their parents, they would make the staff and the people that work here understand that this was not the place for them. They'd never been away from home that long, and they didn't feel good about being there. And they had the mentality that no amount of prayer or singing or Bible study or worship was going to make it any better. They would find any excuse they could as to why being here, or being at a camp, being at a church camp, was the last place they needed to be. They just wanted to go home. Sound familiar to anyone who just heard some scriptures about a little camping situation with Moses? Let's talk about Moses for a minute. Moses, very famous person of the scripture, did incredible things. Once took a staff, stuck it in the ground, led people through the Red Sea, right? Absolutely amazing. Moses, not a good camp counselor. My opinion, but I'm going to stand by it. Here he is. He's got a bunch of campers, and they're grumping. They're upset. They are not happy campers. And when they see this conflict, when Moses sees this conflict, and that the people are upset, and then they want to go home, does he try to fix the problem? No. He turns it theological, go, why are you testing God? Okay, well, maybe that worked for Moses, but it would have never worked for us in a place like this. And I have a feeling, in fact, I'm pretty certain it didn't work for Moses either. In fact, he goes to God and says, I don't know what these people's problems are. And, I love God in this regards and the conversation he has with Moses in this matter, because God's like, well, I think they're thirsty. Maybe we should get them water. Did you notice God doesn't get mad that the people are upset? And I think in part that's because they're upset for a very legitimate reason. You see, one does not go into the desert without water. Water is life. No water, no life. And these people have no water. And water, my friends, is not a luxury. It's a necessity. And they need water. You cannot fault these folks for being upset. So, God works the problem with Moses and gives great advice in the sense of that it worked. You're going to take that stick, the one you used to split the Red Sea, you're going to take that, you're going to beat this rock, and out of it's going to come water. Now, I'll grant you, I don't get this method, I understand how it works, but in all fairness, if I was to bring Moses out to Luther Hill and take him to the well over here and say, water magically flies up out of the ground because of a motor down there, then he'd probably find that a bit odd too. So let's just assume we don't have all the information, or maybe it's just a miracle of God. The point is actually not the point. It's not how we got the water. It's the fact that the water was always there and it just needed to be found. And that is the story of church camp and why we send kids here. Our modern day campers have an often very similar experience as our Israelites do. They come to camp and they're absolutely convinced that their mom and dads have sent them to a place that cannot meet their needs and very well might get them hurt. Might even get them hurt physically, and certainly there's a fear of being hurt emotionally. And in the modern camp, one of the real challenges we have is cell phones. When I was a camper here in a place like this, cell phone wasn't really the concern. Your parents left, they just left. And they weren't coming back until the end of the week, right? And in my case, my parents and the Blairs, whose daughter was with us, weren't coming back until camp was over. And when our modern campers come now, we ask them not to bring their cell phones. And one of the terrible little tricks of the trade is that you'll have campers say, all right, I have a cell phone. They'll hand over that cell phone. What we don't realize is they're handing us a phone that is not their cell phone. It's just an old cell phone, and their cell phone is in their bag. Modern problems, modern world. However, the problem still remains. Our campers come here and they feel sad and displaced, and they're uncomfortable, and they're not sure about why they're here. And they're not sure that that any amount of singing or praying or worshiping is ever going to help what they're feeling. We can take those feelings and kind of give it a name like a thirst. They're absolutely convinced that there is no way that we can answer this need. But that's not true. We know how to hit the rocks around here to find water, if you will. Just a little bit ago, when I got here, I checked in at the office, met the new camp director here. She's fantastic, folks, and turns out that she'd worked at camp many years ago, and one of her young staffers was a young man by the name of Ryan Dockery. And Ryan Dockery that summer was a rather unhappy camper. He wasn't even an unhappy camper. He was worse. He was an unhappy staffer. And he had lost someone very important to him, a good friend of his, and all he wanted to do was pack up and go home. And to add insult to injury, Ryan Dockery was from LaGrange, Texas, which is only about 20 minutes that way. I suspect that not only could he have just made a local call to get himself home, but he might have just been able to walk home if he had wanted to. Well, our new camp director here, she has wisdom, and she said, look, Ryan, of course, many years ago, because Ryan's a lot older now. She said, Ryan, just give me a week, and I really need your help with something anyways. I got this new guy here. His name is Cale, and he desperately needs someone to be with him this week to help him get where he needs to be. And Ryan's like, I don't like this kid. I don't like Cale. I don't want to be here. Just let me get out of here. I lost, and come with every excuse under the sun why he needed to go home. And she said, look, just give me a few days and then we'll figure it out from there. A few days pass. She comes up to him and says, Ryan, thank you for giving me a few days. I'm just wanted to check in with you. Do I need to find you a new cabin? And then we'll figure out what happens from there. And he goes, no, I think we're good. She goes, really? She goes, what changed? Nothing. Well, it turns out he and I were talking, and he had a Sports Illustrated magazine on his bed, and he's interested in the same stuff that I am. He loves sports and baseball and football and all that stuff. I think it's going to work out okay. And she goes, really? Huh. I am shocked. Here's what's really fun. They're both, Cale's family and Ryan's family are coming this summer for family camp. I hope they'll tell the story about how they met. That would be cool. We still know, we knew that 40 years ago, we knew 20 years ago, and we know in 2026 how to find water with beating on sticks, if you will, or beating sticks on rocks, if you will, as an analogy. You know, by Wednesday or Thursday, most of our campers here at a place like this are doing really well. They've discovered that if they speak to their concerns, maybe even lift it up in prayer, if they take part in the worship and involve themselves in community and are willing to allow their hearts to be filled where they're feeling so empty and displaced and lonely and sad, that God can help fill those things in very healthy and wonderful and amazing ways. And when you see that happen, it is inspiring and it is wonderful. They find a real sense of belonging and connection and joy that they haven't found in other places, not even at home, not even in their schools. Just as our Israelites found water hitting a rock with a stick, our kids here are able to find water that's full of rocks and sticks too. And in fact, one of our campers from when I first started here, Jeffrey Blaker, just took a full-time position here working at Luther Hill. And Jeffrey will be doing interesting things like training counselors how to help their campers fill that thirst when they come here. I think that's fantastic, and I'm so very proud of him. Old Testament has plenty of gospel in it. It's a shame. I need to preach more out of it, but hey, tonight we did, and it's awesome. It's amazing. It fills the soul, you know. There's still gospel to be had out of the Old Testament. And the good news is this. Even if our souls are thirsty, God is happy to find a way to help fill it. Thanks be to God. God's grace and peace to you too.